What's happening, Wolfpack? It's your boy back at you again with another episode of Market Watch Mondays. And, before we get started, I just want to say this is not going to be a player analysis. This is why I'm doing it. Right now, it is Sunday at 9 a.m. PST, your boy's time. It's your boy's birthday, but we're still here. We're gonna grind for you guys, man. I'm out here creating content and finding ways for the fucking Wolfpack to win because that's all I care about. That's all I care about is W's in the column for the Wolfpack. So even though it's my birthday, I'm still gonna be out here grinding for you guys. And I got a lot I want to cover today, and I think it's gonna be an episode that you guys enjoy, and it's an episode that people have been asking for. So before we get to it, though, man, you know what time it is, baby. Hit that intro.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So look, it's my birthday. I tweeted this out. My super, super, super dope girlfriend got me some awesome gifts. One of the which was these. I don't know if you can see these, but these like Viore like jogger pants. Uh, I did not know what Viore is before yesterday, but let me say it's like my fucking butt is getting held up in clouds. That's what it feels like, honestly. So she got me one of these. She got me the Viore shorts as well, and she got me some Lululemon joggers. And this is how clutch she is. But she got your boy some top loaders, man. Top loaders, because I've been getting in the card game, and these are pretty clutch. You basically, if you have a high value card, these are what you want to put them in. They're basically magnetic at the top. You pop them open, you put the card in, seal it, boom, bada bing, bada boom, and you're done. Even though she's not into football, she's still supporting me through all these times. That's what you got to keep her, fellas. If they're not into football and they're still supporting you, man, hold on to them. Hold on to them. Don't let them go. So shout out to my girlfriend for that. Super dope gifts. Super pumped to get this started in the comfort of my pants on my birthday to drop some big card facts, baby. Are you guys ready? Let's get it. All right. So first thing I want to cover, though, before we get into the main meat of the episode, I just want to talk a little bit about James Robinson because this is a James Robinson Stan YouTube account. You guys should know that by now. This dude is one of my favorite players, quickly become one of my favorite players in the NFL. You love to root for the underdogs, but we got news that Gardner Minshew is going to be inactive. I think he has a fracture in his throwing hand, so it's kind of expected. Jags have come out and said it's a competition between Mike Glennon and the new rookie, Jake. I forget his name, but first name's Jake. And look, if you're starting Mike Glennon, I don't know what the fuck you're doing as an organization, other than probably tanking for Trevor. Which, look, I get it, legitimately. He is one of the best quarterback prospects to come out in a long time. Now, I think what I'm seeing though, like first when I went to like the Fantasy Life app and on Twitter, like there's a lot of comments and people are asking like, what to do with James Robinson? Are we worried about James Robinson because Gardner Minshew is out? And I think it'd be silly to say that we're not at all worried, but at the same time, I don't want it to be overblown because the narrative that I keep seeing is that wow, like all the defenses are now going to stack the box, right? They're going to stack the box against James Robinson. Look, like we are one of the biggest Gardner Minshew fans on BDGE, but let's not pretend like Gardner Minshew is spreading out the defense as a passer, like the way that Patrick Mahomes is, right? So that was not happening. Granted, I think what this does do though is probably brings down his touchdown upside a bit because Gardner Minshew is probably better than whatever the hell they're going to stroll out there going forward. But I do think they're going to lean on the running game a bit more, so it could mean more volume. So lower TD upside, more volume, probably more dump off passes for James Robinson because Mike Glennon fucking stinks. We all know that. But rookie quarterbacks like to rely on safer options, and that's what running backs give them. And we know James Robinson is more than capable in the running game and in the passing game. I mean, this guy's been putting up fucking digits, boys. He has been putting up digits. So I'm not too concerned, but the stacking the box narrative is one I want to kind of quash because I see this a lot, right? It's like, people automatically jump to stack boxes when they think a QB goes down or like a wide receiver goes down. It's like, oh, they're gonna stack the box and they're against running back now. Stacking the box is more a function of play calling than who is running from the backfield, right? In more instances than not, like if you are running 11 personnel, for those who don't know what that means, that's 3 wide receiver sets, or like 10 personnel, like 4 wide receiver sets, 0 tight ends. The defenses can't stack the box because you're not going to, it doesn't matter who's out there at wide receiver. You're not leaving wide receivers wide open because an NFL quarterback will hit a wide open wide receiver unless it's Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky. They can't hit Darnell Mooney worth a shit. Free Darnell Mooney. Start the movement. But yeah, back to the main thing at hand. Like, what dictates how many players in the box and how many linebackers and safeties can be in the box is play calling, right? And if we look at the Jaguars, where are they in terms of 11 personnel? They are top 6 in the league, currently at number 6 with 72% 11 personnel. So it doesn't matter like that Gardner Minshew's out or whoever's out. Like, yeah, sure, maybe they pay a little bit less respect, but like you still have to get guys out there to defend the wide receivers, to defend. You have the safety deep. They still have legitimate weapons in DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and a couple other guys like freaking what's his name, Chris Conley, who's not a legit wide receiver, but he is a field stretcher. He is someone that you have to respect. So I'm not so sure about this whole like stack the box narrative unless they somehow totally change their play calling and go more towards like 12 personnel with 2 tight ends to basically support the blocking game. But yeah, I would not buy too heavily in that narrative. I would not hit the panic button yet on James Robinson. I would basically be in a holding pattern and see what he does because this guy's balled out the entire time. And he balled out last week against a really, really, really stout run defense in the LA Chargers. So I wouldn't be worried. All right. Now that James Robinson tribute is out of the way, let's get into the main meat of the episode. And I've kind of hinted at this little bit over the last little while, but I wanted to basically give you guys a look into one of the teams that I did I don't call it a rebuild because it was a startup year last year, but I call it a productive struggle. And what a productive struggle is you go into the draft and basically you're not intending to win year one. So all of the moves you're making are more planned for optimal 2-3 year window out. So, chances sometimes it happens that like you do that, you go into it intending to rebuild or productive struggle, but you still end up like winning. So you kind of have to pivot. But most of the times what I do is I will kind of stay the course and kind of make moves optimal to that. So I wanted to give you a look into how that progresses over time, right? Because like a lot of you are new dynasty players for the most part and you haven't seen like this is your first year, right? So, and when your first year, like you're coming from redraft, the purpose is always to win, right? You always want to win, including on this channel. We always want to get you the W, but in Dynasty, we don't want to sacrifice one W for like potentially 3 or 4 W's on the line, right? That's what building a dynasty is all about. And I think the productive struggle is not for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart because like you do have to just stomach losing the first year. And if money is an issue and stuff like that, I totally understand. Like you want to get the W. But for me, like I don't put any money into fantasy and gambling that I can't afford to lose. So that money is never a motivator for me. It doesn't matter if it's a $500 league, $1,000 league, or a $50 league. I don't change my strategy based on how much the buy-in is. And I think that's something that like people have to get comfortable with. And that's something I hope that you guys get comfortable with because if you can't afford to lose the money, you really shouldn't be in that league because it's gonna dictate your psyche. It's gonna cause you a shitstorm of like emotions you don't want to feel. So for me, when it comes to it, money is totally out of the equation, and I'm just playing for optimal strategy. And the productive struggle, the reason why I like to do it is because in that startup year, right? Everyone has rosy colored lens. Everyone thinks they can win. Everyone thinks their team is bomb. Like that is the best part to play contrarian. And a lot of my strategy is contrarian, right? And the reason why I want to play contrarian is because if you're doing something that other people are not doing, you have less competition. And that means you have less competition for trades, you have less competition for strategy, you have less competition for cornering the assets, which in this case is like draft picks and young players. Like other people, if 10 out of even like let's say like 2/3, if 8 out of 12 people in your league are trying to win, while 4 of them are doing the productive struggle, you have a bigger market to sell to, right? So greater demand, higher prices, and you have less competition for the assets you want. So lower price competition, and just like you'll be able to acquire stuff at a much better value. And that is just a basic economic principle, right? Supply and fucking demand, right? The more demand there is for a product, the higher the price. Just like big dogs, just like bunk beds, our price is gonna go up because the demand is fucking rising, right? But the lower the demand and the more the supply, that's more flooding the market. So it's gonna cause like price deflation, right? So that's why I like to do the productive struggle. And to be more realistic, it's not really an 8-4 split, right? Not many people are willing to tank that first year, right? Like I said, everyone wants to win year one. So what I've found is more likely is that there's only like 1 or 2, and most of the times is 1, just me, that's trying to do a productive struggle in the first year, and everyone else is trying to win. So think about it this way. You have 11 buyers for what you're selling. And what you're selling is productive vets and just like selling a dream. That's what I do when I go into these startups. I try and sell a dream. I try and like sell a dream to these guys because they all think their team is really good, and I therefore what they do inherently is they devalue their first round picks, and I go after them. I go after them nonstop throughout the year. Um, Obviously, as the year progresses and the playoff picture takes shape, there will be more people that join the rebuild section, and you'll get more competition. But in the startup, you can basically be competition free, especially if you're in a new dynasty league. Like new dynasty leaguers do not want to lose. They're always looking to win. They're always looking to trade up, always get assets. So just want to give you a brief intro into like what a productive struggle is and why I do it and why I think that you guys should think about doing it. And you don't have to do it year one, right? And although I've seen a lot of big dogs on the Discord channel have messaged me and said, "Hey, I followed your productive struggle year one." Um, it's definitely possible to do it year one. You don't have to do it if it's your first year, but like as some of you are now progressing into your second year dynasty, third year dynasty, this is a tool that I recommend you put in your arsenal. And I don't ever go into a draft before it even starts and just say, "Hey, I'm going to lose this year." That's not really what happens, right? How it progresses and what it comes from is the fact that as the draft falls, right, and as I see people reaching for running backs and willing to pay up to trade up, as I'm always willing to trade down. If the running backs start drying up and like the win now possibilities start to look a little bit more frugal, that's when I pivot, and I'll pivot to like productive struggle. So I'm not saying like go into a draft like, "Yo, I'm gonna fucking lose this draft," but like just be flexible. And if you've read the Big Dog Draft Guide, I really, really stress flexibility in the top rounds of the draft. And what that means is don't draft aging, declining veterans, right? Don't draft guys like Julio 2 years ago. Don't draft guys like some of the older running backs like the Zekes, right? Like I try to stay away from assets like that, like Michael Thomas is like the guys that are like 27, like 28 years old, because if you draft those guys, you're basically committing to a compete now team, right? So like in like tight end premium, like Travis Kelce is a perfect example, right? I think Travis Kelce is like a second round like pick, right? That's where he should be, but I would never take him there because like that commits you to win now, and you really like don't have really any other options. So I like to keep it young, I like to keep it flexible in the first part of the draft, and then should it fall to me that like, hey, like I get some of these running backs at value or I get some of these other things at value, then I'll totally go and win now. But if everyone goes hunger crazy for running backs, as you see this year, what I'll do is I'll just like pivot off of that, right? So now, with all the groundwork laying there, I want to show you what that could result in, right? Because it's cool. Like nobody wants to like lose because they don't know what's coming down the pipeline. I want to show you the promise and the dynasty you can really build by sacrificing that first year and doing a productive struggle build. And I'm gonna take you to one of my leagues, and this is a league that I joined last year. It's called the League of Legends, and I don't know why it's called that, but the commissioner, super great guy, Robert Wilson. I think his tag is the FF Gator. He's a writer over at the Fantasy Footballers. Obviously, legends, absolute legendary people over there. And I was lucky enough to get invited to this league by someone else that I played another league with, and he invited me to this league. And there's other analysts here. There's John Bauer, another great, super sharp dude. If you don't follow him, please do. They got a couple podcasts out there, and then just a bunch of other really cool guys. Man, this is one of my favorite leagues. But in year one, I didn't know anybody, right? I didn't know anybody. I just went into the league and, just like, I guess just tried my best. And what I found was like, people were getting a little bit hungry for that, like win now mentality. So what I did was I really pivoted in the draft, and I'll kind of just go through the draft a little bit and kind of show you some of the trades that I made. But the way I drafted, right. And the first part, so probably do more reading here because of the folks on the podcast. I don't want to rely too heavily on screenshots, but I basically went into this draft. I landed with the 1.09. And what I found was like in the first 2 rounds of the draft, there actually weren't that many takers in terms of like trading at all. So I wasn't really able to get like too many trades done. But what I was able to do is like squeeze out a couple of like third round picks early on by moving like 1 or 2 spots. But yeah, let's just kind of go through here. In the first round, 1.09. Keep in mind this is last year. I took Juju Smith-Schuster, and obviously, unfortunately, he's not been doing great this year. But the rationale behind taking someone like Juju, because he was a first round pick anyways last year, right? For those of you that are new to Dynasty, like he was going like some people were taking him as early as like the top five picks in a super flex draft. Oh, sorry, this is a 12 team super flex half PPR. And the reason why I took Juju is because he's 23 years old, and a lot of the key running backs were gone. So like Christian McCaffrey, Kamara, Mahomes, Barkley, they were all gone. So like the locked in like top end picks were all basically already taken. So I had to like basically fall back to a wide receiver by this point. And what we saw was like Juju was a 22-year-old stud who had been balling out his first 2 years, historically good production at that young age, and young production typically translate into better success later on in the career. So I took Juju because it offered me flexibility. I haven't committed to a rebuild. I haven't committed to anything at this point. I was just basically saying, look, like this gives me the most flexibility out of everyone else on the board. In hindsight, I took him over Michael Thomas for the reason that I said. Wasn't great because Michael Thomas had like one of his best years ever. But the process was the same. Is I wanted to keep flexibility, and Michael Thomas did not give me that flexibility, right? And if you look at some of the guys that went after me, like Joe Mixon, Melvin Gordon, Mike Evans, Nick Chubb, like these are all guys where like I didn't necessarily want to fully commit to them yet. So with that said, in the second round, I went with Amari Cooper. So by this time, a lot of the good like top end running backs are already gone. Same with the quarterbacks. So at this point, I realized like, look, this is where I'm going to probably pivot to productive struggle. So I wanted again youth wide receivers, and Amari Cooper is someone that I've loved forever. I mean, he's been pretty productive, incredibly productive as a young player. He's people hate him because he's boom bust, but for wide receivers, like I said, I don't really care about that shit. So I basically opened with 0 RB draft here, and at this point, I basically said like, look, I no longer want to draft running backs because running backs add points to your starting lineup, and I wanted to make sure that I locked up the 1.01 for the following year because I knew that's going to be worth a fortune given where the 2020 draft is. And before I made that pick for Amari Cooper, I actually traded back, right? And what I did was, so I had the 2.04 and I traded back twice. So I took the 2.04 and the 3.09 and I traded for the 2.07 and the 3.06. So I moved back 3 spots, moved up 3 spots, but I got a 2020 third round pick, right? And then I did the same thing. I went from 2.07 to 2.10 and got the 3.06 for the, sorry, I gave it the 2.07 and the 3.06 for the 2.10 and 3.03. And again, I got another third round pick. And you might be thinking, like, why the hell did you do that? Like, third round picks aren't worth jack shit. And I totally agree. But when I was on the board, there was like aging running backs where I thought people would take, which is exactly what happened, right? Because if you look at what actually transpired on the 2.04 was guys like Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield, and Andrew Luck. And I don't go quarterback early. So I figured like these quarterbacks and these running backs were going to go. And thank God, because I faded Andrew Luck there. And I faded Baker Mayfield, who I wasn't really a believer in at that price. So I basically kept moving back a few slots, and I moved back 2 slots here. But what it ended up allowing me to do is like move back within the same tier of guys. So whenever I'm willing to move back, I'm only trading back because I think I'll get a similar tier unless I'm getting like super compensated with the first, right? So I added 2 third round picks, and people think third round picks are useless, right? But that's only because if you use it on a third round pick, it's useless. The way I think about third round picks, it gives me ammo to move up and down in the draft, in the rookie draft. And it gives you like value plugs, right? Like how often do you get run to trade and you offer like a 1-to-1 and they're like, oh, that's not enough. Like I would do it for like an extra third, right? And you just wish you had like an extra third at that point to give. And in super flex drafts, so a third can be more like a second in single QB drafts. So I'm moving back minimal slots, in my opinion, dropping back minimal tiers, but I'm still landing the players that I want, and that's what I'm doing it. So those are the first 2 trades that I did in this league in the draft. And then if you keep moving back, what you'll see is what did I give up here? I gave up. Oh, sorry. Before we get to that, let's just keep going down the draft. So as I'm going through this draft board, like people are flying off and veterans, and I'm loving this, right? Like Aaron Rodgers, Travis Kelsey, Matt Ryan in the third round, like Keenan Allen, Cam Newton in the third, Dalvin Cook. This was before he broke out last year, obviously. Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, like all these aging guys are falling off ahead of me after I drafted Amari Cooper. And I'm loving this. As a rebuilder, you want to see these guys go off the board because it means you're going to get young guys at value. So at the third round pick, I made another trade. So I gave up my 3.07 and my 5.07. So I got the 3.07 and the 5.07 and a 2020 second round pick for the 3.03 and the 5.09. So I basically moved back 4 spots in the third round, and I moved back. I moved up 2 slots in the in the 5th round, and I got a 2nd round pick. The 2nd round pick is huge, right? This is in the 3rd to 5th rounds in startups. That's when I find the most trades happen. Like people aren't really willing to give up future first round picks and stuff in the 1st and 2nd because they're like nervous and stuff. But once the floodgates open, that's when the trades really start kicking open. So I traded back because at the time there were still younger guys on the board. And this is something that I did a lot last year. Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson were 2 of my most drafted quarterbacks last year. And they were frequently going in the 3rd and 4th round picks of like any draft, like expert drafts, casual drafts, whatever you call it. And they were 2 of my most drafted quarterbacks. So I knew they were on the board, and there were guys like George Kittle and all these older vets that I felt like other people were going to go for on the board. So I traded back, landed my boy Dak Prescott at the 312. Huge value, right? And then in between those picks went Brandon Cooks, Josh Allen, and in the 4th round, I smash picked Lamar Jackson. Did not even entertain any trade offers because Lamar Jackson in the 3rd and the 4th, which is where you could get him last year, was one of the easiest smash picks of all time. So then what do we do, right? So we looked at this, and basically I gave up the 3.10 to move back to get Lamar Jackson, and I moved back 2 slots, right? And from 310 to 312, and I moved up 3 slots from the 6th round to the 601, and I got a 3rd round draft pick. Another mini move, but got 3rd round draft pick and landed my guy. Anytime you land your guy and still get a draft pick, it's great, right? So if we keep moving down the board here, I'm just gonna name off some of my other draft picks. Like again, I just didn't draft running backs. I drafted Tyreek Hill. This is before he was cleared. So in the 6th round, I got him at a value. Obviously, I got N'Keal Harry in the 6th. Rest in peace. That was a huge fucking bust. Mike Williams in the 7th. Again, not a great pick by me. Curtis Samuel in the 9th. Not a great pick by me. See, like I didn't make that many great picks in this draft, to be honest. I like created this league via the trades and the deals that I made later. Like I always said, man, like dynasty, you in redraft, you win or lose your league in the draft most of the time, right? But in dynasty, you win your leagues through trading, right? That's really where it comes up because of all the value shifts. And then basically in the late rounds, in the 10th round here, I went back to back with Dallas Goedert and Noah Fant. I love getting tight ends in dynasty. I've talked to you guys about that before. And when you're rebuilding, I really want to shoot for young upside tight ends because they give you a lot of runway and they're rare and they have a lot of trade value. Yeah, so that's like kind of my first 10 round picks. I don't want to focus too much on that. I want to really dive into the trades that I did in season. But one thing before we leave the draft, I did not draft a running back until the 14th round. Okay. Until the 14th round, Matt Breida was my first running back drafted. And I think he was my only running back drafted until round 17 when I drafted Tony Pollard, who I loved as a handcuff play given to Zeke. And he was like holding out last year or something like that. So yeah, those are the only 2 running backs I drafted so that I could field a starting lineup because I don't want to get fined that way. But as you can see, like I had no intention of winning right from the jump in that league. And what that means is it like kind of frees you, man. It's fucking liberating when you do a productive struggle because you don't have to worry about a starting lineup, right? Normally, like when I'm drafting starting dynasty, I don't worry about starting lineups anyway because unless it's like I'm drafting like August, right? But if I'm drafting in May or June, I literally don't really care about starting lineups because I can always trade and fill a starting lineup that way, right? But what you see most people do is like once they get past a little bit, they'll start drafting for need. They'll be like, oh man, like, I really need to win this year. So let me draft this guy. But when you're drafting in a productive struggle, you really employ be best player available to the best of your ability because you can trade assets as you go to kind of fill as those things come by, but you don't have any needs, right? Because you're not trying to win. You're just trying to accrue value. So like needs, the hardest part of the equation gets completely removed and tossed out the window, and you're only drafting for value. So and when I say drafting for value, I mean drafting for players that have value, not like drafting a shitty player because he fell to your value. Like you're only playing the value game, and I'm only looking at these players and saying like, will their value increase from now until next year? That's all I care about, right? I don't care about how many points you're going to put up for me this year. I don't care about how many points you're going to put up for me next year. Even I just care about what their value will be and what the public market perception of them will be, and that's like the entire segment Monday Watch Mondays is based on, right? Is about identifying value, identifying trends in the market so you can capitalize. So productive struggles really allow you to do that. So I left the draft with 2 running backs, right? But I locked up the quarterback position. Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, 2 young studs, in my opinion, right? So, and then what I did in the super late rounds, I drafted a bunch of like backup quarterbacks. And if you remember, last year was a really brutal year for quarterbacks. So like a lot of backup stepped up, and I was able to flip those value assets for value later, which I'll walk you through now. But in season, I did a lot of trades, and I'll just kind of list them off here. So in season, I gave up Will Greer, who's a backup quarterback, at least people thought he was, Tony Pollard and Zay Jones for 2022 second and 2021 second to a contender. And that sounds like a insane deal to do now, right? But at the time, you were getting a backup quarterback. He was handcuffing his main quarterback in Cam Newton, and he was getting Tony Pollard to handcuff Zeke. And at the time, Zeke was holding out, right? So that's when you capitalize on that value there. And then what I do is trade down, right? I do live trade downs using players. Just because you left the draft does not mean you cannot trade down anymore. Like when I talk about trading down in the season, what I mean is take a stud player and trade down for a couple lower assets. And those lower assets are usually guys that I want to bet on. So I took Amari Cooper and I flipped them for Evan Ingram and a 2021 first, right? And that deal right now, I don't know how that looks. I still won because of where that 2021 first came out. But at the time, Evan Ingram was producing like a stud. He was a stud tight end. I wanted another stud tight end in my lineup, and I didn't need Amari Cooper in my lineup. I didn't want him scoring all those points. And more importantly, I landed another 2020 first, and that was the key. When I left the draft, I had mine, and I think I had acquired one more other first, which I got by giving up I think like a fifth round or like a seventh round pick for their 10th round pick and a first, and I gave up like a second or something like that. And at the time, I had like a bunch of seconds, and that's why in the draft I say like trade for thirds and seconds, because you can often use those to kind of like leverage your way into a first and slowly build up into a first, right? Like if you have like a bunch of thirds, when you trade back, maybe you say, hey, like I'll let you move up if you give me your second and I'll give you back a third plus a swap in the main round. And then once you have a bunch of seconds, you can be like, hey, I'll let you swap up and I'll give you like a second back for a first. And that's, you slowly accumulate value, like build on top of each other with using a third to a second to multiple seconds to a first. So I left the draft with about, I think, 2 first round picks. So this is my third first round pick. So now I own 1/4 of the 2020 draft, right? The 2020 first round draft. And I own like half of the second round. So, and the team that I traded with was one I identified as like more of a middling team. It wasn't a top end team. It was a middling team that thought they had a chance to move to the top. And if you watch some of my prior episodes, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Those are the teams you want to target. You want to sell them the dream. You want to sell them the American dream, the pursuit of happiness. Everything's possible. They can win it all. If you give up your first, it's for this player, it'll probably be a late first. And if you can convince them to do that, you take it every time. Anytime you can buy a first for a late first, you do it because, like I said, it leaves all the room for upside for you and no room for downside. All right. So I did that, and then in mid in the season when Jacoby Brissett was like the starting quarterback, I went to another team and I traded Jacoby Brissett, Raheem Mostert for 2021, and that was a team that was, again, they were like more middle of the pack, but they needed a quarterback to kind of push them over the edge. And in their eyes, like this 2021 was like basically just a cost of winning, and that 2021 turned out to be the 2021 1.01 or 1.02. It was a top 3 pick. So I fucking made it like a bandit on that one. That really helped me down the line. And then what are some other trades that I made of note? Oh, yeah. And then I gave up Matt Breida and Jacob Hollister at the time, who was a starting tight end, for another 2022 and a 2024. And then yeah, so that's like all the trades I made throughout the year. So all in all, I made 18 trades total. So you got to be active, man. 18 trades total in that league between the startup draft and in season. So I left that season with 4 first round picks. No, sorry. Yeah, 4 first round picks and 5 second round picks. So I owned 50% of the rookie second round draft, and I owned 40% of the first round draft, all 4 of which were top 6 picks. I had 3 of the top 4 picks, including my own, because I had the 1.01 or the 1.02 or something like that. So what that allowed me to do is absolutely control the markets, right? So I tanked that first year, I had no chance of winning, but now I'm leaving with all this draft capital, right? What is step 2 in the productive struggle process? The one mistake I see people make is they hog all those first round picks and second round picks, and then what they do is they're unwilling to trade them for veterans when they're ready to make a push, and they use all those picks. And that is the number one mistake you make, right? Like people always talk about rookie bust rates, about like how half of the first round picks bust. And that's really true, but you don't have to use those picks. And there are various analytics metrics that are proven to help you fade busts, right? And we talk about this all the time on the channel. So if you're not using all those picks and you target the ones that are more likely to hit, your hit rate, at least my hit rate, is much closer to like the 60, like 70% range versus the generic like 50% range. Like 50% hit bust rate is for fish, right? Is if you just draft blindly, and that's not how it's done. And more importantly, these picks that I held throughout the entire year, all they did increase in value. Why do I say hog rookie picks? Why do I say they're the most undervalued? Because if you look at those trades, at the times that I traded them, they were not traded at their future value, right? They were traded at in the moment value. And later on, all those picks accrued in value, right? All those picks accrued in value. And what I did was, now that I'm ready to compete, did I use all those picks? Hell no, man. When I was on the clock, I was wheeling and dealing to basically to get some veterans on my team and to really build out a full team, right? My roster at the end of that year was Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, CJ Prosise was my only running back, right? And then I had N'Keal Harry, Tyreek Hill, Rashad Perriman, Curtis Samuel, Darius Slayton, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Williams, Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, Irv Smith Jr. As you can see, I freaking really love young tight ends. I had a ton of them. So not a roster by any means, right? And I'll give you a snapshot of what that roster looks like on the screen so you guys can see it. And then I'll show you a later snapshot of what it turned out to be. But yeah, so like first year production struggle in the books. Now 2020 starts off, right? Rookie hype season. What do I do, right? And this is where you make your money, right? This is really where you make your money. And in peak rookie draft season, that's when rookie picks are at its highest value. So what I did was I started to go after running backs, like stud workhorse running backs, because people were really hyped about like the Jonathan Taylors, the Joe Burrows, et cetera, et cetera. So the first trade I made was I gave up Mike Boone and the 2020 1.01 and a 5th round pick for Joe Mixon and a 2020 4th round pick and a 2021 3rd round pick. So that trade basically ended up being like Joe Burrow for Joe Mixon. And look, now at this time, I probably took an L on that pick, but at the time when I did it, Joe Mixon was still a 1st round starter pick. That's just to give you a sense for how much value you can extract when trading these top end rookie picks, because rookie fever hits everyone, right? I don't give a fuck if you're Matthew Berry. I don't care if you're me. I don't care if you're Nick, Noah. Like in this case, one of the other analysts I was playing with, like everyone gives into rookie fever, right? So you can always command extreme amount of value for them. And then what I did was, I think with the 1.02, I took my boy Jonathan Taylor. I already had quarterback resolved with Lamar and Dak. Didn't have to worry about that at the time. And then with the 1.03, I traded it because there was a team out there who was a rebuild. One of the teams actually gave me one of their first, who thought they were going to contend and realized that quickly that they weren't going to. And they were desperate for the quarterback position. They had like Jacoby Brissett and like another aging guy. And like basically they're going to have 0 quarterbacks. They're going to go 0 quarterbacks in Superflex leagues within like 2 years. So Tua was on the board. I knew this guy needed a quarterback, and I knew he wasn't contending. So I'd been in discussions with him for months about like potentially getting Alvin Kamara, who I thought was a top end running back. I thought he was like similarly in the same tier as like CMC and Saquon Barkley. So I was able to wheel this pick into 1.03, and I give it the 2.05 for Alvin Kamara, right? So that sounds insane to you, right? Now, but now that we have the number 1 running back in fantasy, but at the time, you play the needs, and you like after the startup draft, like values are very different depending on the needs of the player. So they were really happy getting Tua. And I think Tua was going to be a baller anyways. So maybe long term it still works out for them. But I really love that trade for me. So now I went from no running backs, right? No running backs to Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. At the time, consensus like top 8 running backs with just 2 picks in 1 year. Okay, in 1 year. And then with the 1.06, which was and then with the 1.04, what I do? I took Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I knew this guy's gonna take Tua, so I was comfortable trading away that pick to land both my running back 1 and running back 2 of the class, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So now look at my team, right? I went from 0 running backs to Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 1 year. 1 year production struggle, okay? And then with my 1.06 pick, I wanted a tight end because knowing that, Evan Ingram is kind of like, he wasn't as good as I thought he would be, right? So I need to really backfill that stud position. So what I did was I took Irv Smith, the 1.06, and my 3.04, and I got Mark Andrews and the 1.02. So I basically moved back from 1.06 to 1.02, 1.12, because I know this guy really, really wanted a running back. He was starving for running back, and DeAndre Swift and Cam Akers were all on the board. So I moved back 6 picks, and it hurt me to do that, right? I dropped off a tier, but I got Mark Andrews, who in my eyes at the time and still is a top 3, top 4 dynasty tight end, and I got to pair him with my boy Lamar Jackson. So, and I know there's still going to be studs left at the 1.12. Whether it's the wide receivers I really like, or even though I didn't like him at the time, Justin Herbert, quarterbacks would be available. I could add a third quarterback to my team. So that's why I made that pick, right? And then what did I do? So those are the main trades of note in the draft. So from there, I've basically now flipped my team around and populated a starting lineup within one season, right? And one other trade I made this year so far is that after Dak Prescott went down, I obviously need another quarterback. Even though I had Justin Herbert, the god, I still wanted one. So I gave up Dak Prescott and Noah Fant. Again, I had those stable of stud young tight ends. So I can afford to trade someone like Noah Fant. And I got back Kyler Murray and a 2021 third round pick. So if you look at my roster now, I don't want to be like, we're not trying to roster bait here, but I just want to show you the results of what you can expect to get. And if I look at my team, I'd say I'm pretty fucking well off, right? If I compare to what I had in my first year. So let me just read that off again real quick. So in year one, I left that season with Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott as my two quarterbacks, right? And I had CJ Prosise as my only running back, and then I had Tyreek Hill, N'Keal Harry, Curtis Samuel, Juju Smith-Schuster, Darius Slayton, Mike Williams, Evan Ingram, Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, Irv Smith Jr. as my tight ends. But I left with 4 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks, and like 5 second-round picks and 5 or 6 third-round picks. Now, after the rookie draft this season, what does my team look like? And here's what it looks like. I have Lamar Jackson. I have Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, who I drafted at 1.12 after trading out from 1.06 to 1.12. So, and now Justin Herbert is worth more than DeAndre Swift. So I basically got Mark Andrews there for free. So I have Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, right? Those are my quarterbacks. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, right? So those are my 4 stud running backs. I also have DJ Dallas and Darius Geis as kind of like my flyers, right? And then on my wide receivers, I have Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, who I drafted, Laviska Shenault, who I drafted, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Williams, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Johnson, who I drafted, and Travis Fulgham, who I grabbed off waivers, right? And then my tight ends, I have Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert. I have this team, and I still have a 2021 first, 3 2021 seconds, 3 2021 thirds, and like 2 fourths, right? So I have this team, and I'm still loaded to be able to draft picks to draft rookies and continue loading my team for next season. And I'm currently undefeated in this league. Let's see what the standings are here. I'm currently 7-0 with about 1,077 points for, which is good for second in the league. Shout out to Rob. His team's actually balling as well. He's got 10 more points than me in the points for column. He's in second place. But yeah, I mean, look at that. Just 1 year, right? 1 year, my roster went from absolute shit, but calculated shit to 4 absolutely stud running backs, right? And now I'm a top end contender and potentially looking to take home the championship. My team is still young, right? I have a lot of studs at wide receiver, a lot of studs at running back who are incredibly young with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor. And I have the running back 1 in Alvin Kamara. So great balance there. I have like Tyreek Hill, I have T. Higgins, Laviska Shenault, up and coming young wide receivers, which I got with those second round picks that I had been stocking. So like the reason why I wanted to show you guys this, and this is a long episode, I'm sorry for that, but like, this is like what your team could be, right? And this is the 1 year turnaround that you can have if you take the approach that I wrote out in the draft guide. If you take the productive struggle approach, and like, if you, let's say you join like 6 leagues, right? If you have 8 leagues or whatever, I would encourage you to try this in like 2 or 3 of them, because it's really fun. It's how you can really cement and build a dynasty by capitalizing on the short-sightedness of other managers and league players. And you can end up with a fucking dynasty. And this is not like one of one. This is not like a fluke that I have. I can show you guys, and I will probably show you guys like other examples of teams that I've done where I've done this 1 year turnaround. I'm also in another league very similar to this, 12-man super flex. I went from productive struggle, and I'm now undefeated in most points for, right? In one season turnaround. And that's how quick it can be. You don't want to be those guys that like only have like one rookie first round pick and just like slowly like inch and crawl and try and get your back way to the back to the top, because that is a very slow rebuild. But this way, you sacrifice a 1 year. Yes, it's pain, but it's like ripping off a band-aid, right? It's really quick. And 1 year later, you're looking at an incredibly studly team. So that's where I'll stop the episode, because it's getting hella long. I'll try and incorporate some screenshots in here, but I try to read as best as I can, so you guys have an example of what's going on. But I'll throw some screenshots up there of my rosters and stuff like that so you can see it. But that's kind of where I'm at. Hope you guys found it helpful. If you like this episode, I'll try and do more of these with some of my other teams, both contenders and rebuilds, to show you what it looks like. To give you an example, right? Like, no one wants to lose, right? But if you sacrifice that first year, this is like this could be your like goal, right? This could be like the light at the end of the tunnel for you to see like how you do it. And like I said, this was like an analyst league and sharp league, and this is only my second year in dynasty league, so I'm not playing against like scrubs. It's like people know what they're doing. It's just like different goals and different ways to leverage. Like what I like to do is like leverage the human psyche component, right? So hope you guys enjoyed. Smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, please, please, please. It helps us more than you know. Share with your friends. And follow me on Twitter and engage, man. Join the Discord. Follow me on Twitter. We're usually on there engaging with all you guys, and just shooting the shit and talking football, man. So that's it. Thanks again, and I'll see you for another episode of Watch It, Watch It, Watch It.